Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into Daniel chapter 10 today.
Ooh, that's a good one. Lots of imagery in that one.
It is. It's known for its vivid, well, everything. And that mysterious encounter, right, with the angel.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to unpack it all. It's the third year of King Cyrus of Persia's reign, just to set the scene. Daniel, who's also known as Belteshazzar, he receives this vision. But before all that, we find out that he's been in mourning, like deep mourning.
It's not just a little bit sad, is it? It says he's not eating any rich foods or meat or wine or even oil for 3 weeks.
Wow, that's some serious commitment. Is there any deeper meaning to that kind of fasting, especially before, something big's about to happen?
Well, it's a powerful way to prepare yourself, right? It shows humility and it helps you connect with the divine. It's not just a Daniel thing either. Fasting is something you see in a lot of different faiths.
Right.
Often as a way to kind of clear your mind and get ready for these big spiritual moments.
I see. So it's like Daniel's intentionally getting rid of all these worldly distractions so he can be more open to what's about to happen.
Exactly. And so we find Daniel by the Tigris River.
Already a pretty dramatic setting.
It is. And on the 24th day of the first month, he sees this, extraordinary figure.
The description's pretty wild. Clothed in linen, with a gold belt, and his body's like jasper, a face like lightning, fiery eyes, bronze limbs.
Talk about making an entrance.
Right.
It's all meant to make you feel awe and the power of this being, Imagine seeing that.
I can't even imagine. But what's interesting? Daniel's the only one who sees this. The men with him are so scared they run away.
Oh, yeah. They take off.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah.
What makes some people more sensitive to these kinds of spiritual experiences?
That is a great question. Makes you think, how would you react?
I'm not sure I'd be much braver than those guys, honestly.
It really shows you how personal these encounters are,
And Daniel's reaction is intense, too. He loses all his strength, feels drained, terrified, and just collapses.
Falls right to the ground.
Yeah, it's like this being is radiating some kind of energy that's too much for him to handle.
And then a hand touches him.
Whoa.
And it's not a gentle touch either. It's like it sets him on his hands and knees.
Oh, wow.
It makes the whole thing feel so physical, doesn't it? Like it's not just a vision in his head. It's actually happening.
Yeah. Then the being speaks, and, the first thing he says is actually kind of comforting.
Highly esteemed, he calls him. Tells him to stand up, don't be afraid. A little like calming a scared child.
A bit, yeah. Very reassuring. And then he explains why he's there. He says he came because of Daniel's prayers, that he's been heard since the very first day he humbled himself.
Imagine hearing that, right? That your prayers are actually being heard.
That would be pretty amazing.
But then it gets interesting. Because it turns out this being was delayed.
Delayed? How come?
For 21 days, he was opposed by the prince of the kingdom of Persia.
Prince? Wait, what does that even mean?
That's where things get a little otherworldly. We get a peek into this whole idea of spiritual warfare.
Okay.
This prince isn't some human ruler, no. He's a powerful spiritual entity, maybe even an angel connected to the Persian kingdom.
Whoa. So there's this whole unseen battle going on behind the scenes.
Exactly, with these spiritual beings fighting for, influence, power.
It's a little unsettling to think about, honestly.
It is, and then it gets even more complicated because the angel Michael, who's described as a chief prince, he had to step in and help.
Really?
It's like there's some kind of hierarchy in the spiritual realm, ranks and authority. It's fascinating.
It really changes how you see this vision. Right. It's not just a personal message for Daniel anymore. It's part of something much bigger.
Absolutely. And then, almost casually, the being tells him he's there to explain what'll happen to Daniel's people in the latter days. It's a prophecy about the future.
Wow. No wonder Daniel can't speak. The text says he's lying there, completely speechless.
Overwhelmed. You can imagine the weight of this encounter, right?
Yeah. And then it says something like a human hand touches his lips, and he's able to speak again.
Another physical manifestation of the spiritual breaking through.
So powerful.
It's affecting him on every level, this whole encounter. Physically, emotionally, spiritually.
And finally able to speak, he admits to the being that he's scared. He's weak. He's been fasting, mourning, and now this.
He's been through a lot.
Yeah. And the being, in another gesture of, power, but also tenderness, he touches him again.
Strengthens him.
Yeah. He says, peace be to you, be strong, be very strong. And it's not just words. He actually feels stronger.
It's not just a pep talk. It actually has an effect.
And he feels ready to keep talking.
And what a conversation it is.
Right. So the being reveals why he came. To tell Daniel what's written in the Book of Truth.
The Book of Truth. Now that's intriguing.
Yeah, what do we know about this book? What makes it so important?
It doesn't really go into details, which is frustrating, right? But it definitely sparks the imagination. Some people think it refers to this heavenly record of God's will. Others see it as symbolic, of God's plan.
Oh, interesting. So there's a lot of debate about it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But one thing's clear. This book holds some really important information. And to make things even more interesting, even this powerful being needs help to access it.
He needs help, really.
He says only the angel Michael can strengthen him against other, princes.
More princes.
Yeah. The one from Persia we already talked about, but also the Prince of Greece, we find out later.
Hold on. So this isn't just a messenger angel. He needs backup from Michael just to do his job.
Exactly. It really shows you how intense the spiritual realm is, right? We've gone from this personal encounter to a cosmic battle, a prophecy, a mysterious book, and now back to these powerful princes. It's wild.
It really is. It's a lot to take in.
It is, isn't it? Makes you think.
Definitely makes you think.
I mean, if this being, who's clearly super powerful, needs help from Michael to fight these princes, what does that tell us about spiritual warfare, right?
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing. What are these princes exactly, and what kind of power do they even have? It's a little, unsettling to think there might be these unseen forces out there messing around, and we're just clueless.
It definitely makes you question things, right? This idea that there are these spiritual beings, maybe even angels, that are tied to different nations and kingdoms.
Right.
You actually see hints of this in other parts of the Bible, too.
So it's not just some random idea they threw in here.
No, there's actually a whole area of study on this, angelology.
Angelology.
It looks at the roles and hierarchies in the spiritual realm.
Wow.
It's really fascinating, but it's complicated, too. It suggests that the spiritual world is just as structured and organized as the physical world.
Maybe even more so.
Yeah, maybe even more so.
Okay, so back to Daniel. What does all of this mean for him? And what can we, take away from his experience?
Well, first of all, it reminds us that prayer is powerful. Daniel's prayers were heard, even though there were obstacles and, that delay.
It's reassuring, for sure.
Definitely a message of hope and encouragement, especially for anyone who feels like their prayers are just going nowhere.
Right, but it wasn't like a casual prayer, though, was it? He went through a lot of preparation before this vision.
Oh, yeah. His mourning and fasting, those weren't just empty rituals. They were about humbling himself before God and getting ready for what was coming.
So it's more than just saying a quick prayer before bed. You're saying we need to be, intentional about connecting with the divine.
Exactly. And even though he was scared at first, remember, Daniel was willing to listen and engage with this angel.
He didn't run away like those other guys.
Yeah, he didn't shy away from the encounter, even though it was overwhelming.
So there's a courage element here, too. Even when you're faced with something completely unknown, you need to be open to it.
Absolutely. And because he was willing to engage, he got this message that changed his life. But not just his life, It impacted the future of his people, too. This wasn't just about Daniel. This was about something much bigger.
You mentioned the future of his people, and I know the angel specifically talks about what will happen to them in the latter days, but what does that even mean? Is that a specific time period?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And scholars have been debating it for centuries.
Oh, I bet.
Some people think it's a specific time in the future, while others think it's more general, like the time leading up to, God's big plan for humanity. The text doesn't really give us a clear answer.
So it's kind of up to us to figure out what it means and how it applies to our lives.
Exactly. This is where our understanding of faith and prophecy comes in. How do we interpret these kinds of messages? And how do they shape the way we see the world and our place in it?
It's definitely a chapter that raises more questions than it answers. Maybe that's the point.
You might be right. Sometimes the questions are just as important, if not more so. They push us to think, to explore different perspectives. And in this case, to really wrestle with the mysteries of the spiritual realm.
It's true. And speaking of mysteries, we talked about this Book of Truth earlier. What do you make of its significance?
Well, the chapter doesn't go into specifics, which is, like I said, frustrating, but also intriguing. It's like we're getting a glimpse of something super important, but we can't see the whole picture.
Right. So do you think it's a literal book? Or more of a symbol for something else?
That's tough to say. there are different schools of thought on this, you know?
I figured it.
Some people think it's a real book, like a heavenly record, maybe with God's decrees, or a detailed account of history, past and future. Who knows?
Interesting.
But then others think it's more of a metaphor for God's wisdom or divine plan.
So how should we approach this book of truth then? What's the takeaway for us?
I think the main takeaway is that there's a bigger plan at work, a divine order, even if we can't always see it. The book of truth represents this ultimate source of knowledge and wisdom, and we can try to understand it and align ourselves with it.
That's a really helpful perspective. It makes you think about how important it is to seek truth in our own lives.
Yeah.
Not just taking things at face value, but really digging deeper and searching for understanding.
Right. And that search often involves tough questions, exploring different viewpoints, and being open to the idea that there's always more to learn.
This whole episode is like peeling back the layers of an onion. We started with Daniel mourning by the river, and now we're talking about spiritual warfare, angels representing nations, and this mysterious book of truth. It's a lot.
It is, but it's fascinating too, isn't it? This chapter really pushes us to think beyond what we see and consider the unseen forces that might be at play in the world.
And the fact that even this powerful angel needed Michael's help to overcome these spiritual princes. What does that tell us about good versus evil? Is it always so black and white?
That's a deep question. It suggests that the battle between good and evil might be more complicated than we think. There might be layers of complexity, alliances we don't see, maybe even a need for cooperation, even among the most powerful beings. It reminds us that we're not alone in this struggle, whatever form it takes in our lives.
It's kind of comforting in a way to know that even these powerful beings need help sometimes. Makes me wonder, what role do we play in all of this?
Yeah.
However small it might seem.
That's a great point. We often feel powerless when big things are happening, Rice. But Daniel's story shows us that even small acts of faith, courage, and obedience can make a difference. A bigger difference than we might realize.
Like we're being shown that even in these huge battles between good and evil, we have a part to play. We're not just watching from the sidelines.
Exactly, and that's what makes Daniel's story so relatable. Here's this guy who starts out overwhelmed and scared, literally drained. But through this encounter, he finds strength, he's empowered, and he's entrusted with this incredibly important message.
He goes from paralyzed with fear to being a channel for divine revelation. It's a pretty amazing transformation.
It is, and it's a transformation that's available to all of us. We may not all have visions of angels, but we can all choose to engage with the spiritual, to seek understanding, and to be open to how we might be called to serve a greater purpose.
So we've unpacked this incredible encounter. A mysterious angel, a message about the future, a glimpse into a cosmic battle, and Daniel's journey from fear to strength.
It's a chapter that really stays with you. It sparks your imagination. It makes you think about the deeper meaning behind everything that's happening in the world.
It definitely leaves us with a lot to think about. If even this powerful being needed Michael's help to fight the princes of Persia and Greece, what does that tell us about spiritual warfare and the forces at play in the world?
It challenges how we see things, doesn't it? It suggests that maybe the battle between good and evil isn't always so straightforward, and there are layers of complexity that we might not even grasp.
And that maybe we're not always seeing the full picture.
Right. It's like there's this whole other dimension operating alongside our own with its own rules and its own battles.
And it makes you think, what about those battles in our everyday lives? If these powerful beings are facing opposition, what does that mean for us regular folks trying to, just live out our faith?
It's definitely a reminder that spiritual growth isn't always like a walk in the park, right? There are going to be challenges and setbacks, times when you feel overwhelmed, just like Daniel did.
But he didn't give up. He leaned into the experience, even when it was scary.
Exactly. And because of that, he gained insight and strength, right?
It's like facing your fears head on can actually lead to growth.
It can. It's a key takeaway, I think. Our willingness to engage with the spiritual, even when it's tough, opens us up to, transformation.
And it makes me think about that book of truth again. If it really is this ultimate source of knowledge, how do we access it? Is it something we can just study?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it more about, aligning ourselves with a certain way of being?
That's a great question. Maybe it's a bit of both, We can definitely search for knowledge through things like scripture, tradition, personal reflection.
Yeah.
But maybe the book of truth is also something you access by living a certain way, with integrity, compassion, seeking justice. Qualities Daniel definitely had.
So it's not just about reading the right things, it's about living the right way.
I think so. It's about connecting with those deeper truths that resonate inside us and letting them guide our actions.
Daniel's story is full of symbolism, isn't it? The fasting, the angel, this book. Do you think we're supposed to take it all literally? Or is there something more there?
That's what's so cool about these ancient texts. They work on so many levels. You've got the historical narrative, but then there's this deeper, symbolic, spiritual dimension.
Right, right. So how should we approach a chapter like this then? What are some helpful ways to engage with it, beyond just reading the words?
I'd say don't be afraid to ask questions, explore different interpretations, and try to connect the symbols you see to your own life, your own experiences.
A journey, not a destination, right?
Exactly.
This deep dive has definitely been a journey for me. We started with a simple vision, and now we're talking about spiritual warfare and prophecies and the very nature of truth.
It's amazing how much depth and meaning you can find in just one chapter, right? It really shows you the power of these stories to still resonate with us today.
So as we wrap things up, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from Daniel's experience?
I think the most important message is that even when things are uncertain, even when you're facing challenges, even when you're scared, there's always hope.
Always hope.
There's this divine power at work, and we can choose to connect with it. Just like Daniel, we can face our fears, search for understanding, and let the experience change us for the better.
That's a powerful message. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Daniel chapter 10. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking those deeper truths that light up our lives.